have that discussion contextualized in that sense, so that at least we're just not floating in the air at the end of the day. Yeah.
So, okay. I think then we, Dr. AMG, let's listen to you, then have a discussion post that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I will take this opportunity to uh, really appeal to our listeners to say, you know what, we have been doing this series. And if you have been following the way we have been going about it, we're just trying to go to the basics. So we haven't lost our initial focus in terms of having an embracing dialogue, so that at least we have an engaging kind of a platform, especially from the pipeline perspective, where we are saying how best can we simplify the communication around cybersecurity, and how can we even communicate awareness. But mostly importantly, I think from our last session in April, there was an appeal to try and maybe find some way amongst some of these slots where we could have that kind of a hands-on practical approach to some of the recommendations we are actually giving. I'm not promising that this is what you're going to be doing in this session for the month of May. Of course, it's in the pipeline. We haven't forgotten about that promise from the last session. So, what our session in terms of this first introductory section that I'm just going to walk you through, what I normally call maybe the theory part, because it's me mostly just going through a bit of some talking points, which we may discuss to more depth later on, a couple of minutes from now. But I wanted to look at what are the trends and what are some of the actions that are being recommended around some of those trends in the context of cybersecurity. So I'll just refresh your mind by just walking you back to the recap of where we started off from, where we are, and hopefully you can also have a bit of a picture in terms of where we are going as well. So, as a way of doing a quick recap, I can say we started off in the month of February, where we had an episode that we dubbed the grassroots, and we moved on to the cyber ninjas in March. And as of last month, we were talking of the home network and just trying to see how everything was building up together, from the CIA triad, from really taking care of your digital footprint and just being aware of what you do while you're online. So during this month of May, if we really are sticking to what we proposed in terms of our schedule outline, we're looking at the professional. So, in a sense, we still don't want to divorce the person inside the home network to be a totally different person than the professional. So, it's still the same person, but in this case, we are broadening the scope in terms of the impact, because you might be working for an organization. And as a result, your actions that is in the digital space is now a wider impact to various even other home networks as they converge as a professional. Sometimes you're even also the chief information officer for a certain organization, and whatever actions or whatever decisions you have to make will actually have an impact to various other networks as well. So this is where our focus in today's discussion is going to be centered around. And just to make sure maybe we don't lose touch with what also is happening around the whole concept of cybersecurity, we just had this approach for this month's discussion to say, let's look at some of the trends which are being circulated or shared globally around cybersecurity. So if you look at the top 7 trends in cybersecurity for 2022, I was really tempted to just default for the Gartner trends. Normally, they are the most popular ones being used. I may not go through all of them in much more detail, but I'll just touch on maybe maybe three of them or so for the purposes of just contextualizing this discussion. We can dig deeper more into some of these trends in a way. But just to mention them in passing without really going into much details. So they talk of the first trend as the attack surface expansion. Just to simplify that so that at least we are all on the same page, with the attack surface expansion, we are looking at the number of devices that are now able to connect to the internet, the number of networks that you have to interface with as you are operating in the digital space. You're also having your work being served to the cloud. You're working from the cloud. Your storage is in the cloud. So that, bring on top of it the Internet of Things. Everything is connected. Some ordinary everyday objects now have the capability of being connected to the internet. This is where the whole concept of the attack surface expansion is coming into play. Almost virtually everything has the capability of being connected. You can talk, even imagine, from the jacket that you're wearing, from the wristwatch that you're wearing, he has the capability of being connected. So that's that typical trend. And if I'm to refresh your minds, looking at this quote here that I took from the Gartner to say, the ever expanding digital footprint of modern organizations drives this year cybersecurity trends. And indeed, that is very true, because if you are looking at now, we are having this hybrid mode of working where we are working from home. And if I'm looking at the statistics, the distribution, to say almost like 75% are working in the cloud, and roughly in the maybe around the region of 25% in terms of the hybrid working mode, are not even considering going back to the traditional way of being in an office. So that type of even a working platform also has its implications in a sense. And if we look at trend number 2, identity system defense, and I'm just going to expand on that, especially that's one trend that I'll also maybe just discuss in more depth, so that at least we are in a position to understand. This is where you would actually find such concepts where we have identity theft, and as a result of the many security credentials that you're supposed to be having, your login passwords, you needing to have two-factor authentication for the applications that you're using. So that whole identity system defense is a trend that needs to be really focused on, because if we don't focus on that, we are leaving a back door open where attackers are going to maximize and utilize that. Then we have the digital supply chain risk as one of the trends. This really is one of the main aspects that is more prevalent, especially if you're looking at the way we are operating in this digital world, looking at where we are going with technology. Because you are looking at a trend in the sense that you have even your suppliers. They are also sometimes, let's say, they're in the cloud, and their weaknesses in terms of their network, it's not going to be their own problem on their own, because they also translate their weaknesses from their networks to your network as well, if you're an organization. So if you are a professional, as our focus for this month, consider the implication of what you do in your organization. It's not only going to affect your organization, it's going to affect everybody in your network. It's going to affect everybody that whether your customers, whether your suppliers, they are going to be affected, because they are going to interact with your network at the end of the day. Then we have the trend of vendor consolidation. It's also an interesting concept as well. And I was just also looking at the January 2022 survey that was done by Checkpoint, where most organizations were preferring to have kind of one platform, kind of a dashboard where they just bring all their security solutions into one place. And that has its own implications. We're talking of sometimes a single point of failure. So as a professional, you might be in that seat, maybe as a chief information officer for your organizations, advising on a best approach. There is a question for you. What is the best approach that you're going to look at, especially when you're looking at the vendor consolidation trend that is existing? Then we have the trend on the cybersecurity mesh. So with the cybersecurity mesh, it's almost like, it's not like really something new, but they call it a modern conceptual approach where you would have your security architecture that enables your enterprise to have that distributed kind of an approach, especially when you're deploying your security solutions. And in a sense, you're trying to integrate your security solutions to almost every component of your operations, in a sense. So that's that whole aspect. So you no longer have maybe that centralized approach to say we only have the IT department that is supposed to be focused and concerned about security. Each and every other unit is also supposed to be concerned. So as a professional dealing with cybersecurity, or even outside the field of cybersecurity, you can't ignore that trend as well, because you need to make sure that cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility, whether in your department, whether within your unit that you're managing. Then we have the distributed decisions. I think that also ties with the trend of the cybersecurity mesh, where we are simply saying we are not confining the whole decisions about let's secure our systems, let's secure our businesses only to the security people. We are saying even your marketing guy also has to have that knowledge of what to do. And it's only doesn't have to end there. We should have a community of practice that we are creating within our operational environments. Then lastly, the trend on beyond awareness. I like this concept. It's a pity that I will not maybe go into more details around uh, this trend, but it's going to be interesting if we are going to touch it in much depth in our next sessions. So, beyond awareness as a trend, it's looking at the deficiencies that we are already seeing in the current cybersecurity practices, where we are having such aspects around to say, if you look at traditional approaches when it comes to cybersecurity awareness, they really are not being effective, because the human errors are keeping on cropping as one of the weaknesses around cybersecurity threats, especially with the attack surface being increasing in a sense. And if I'm just to go in much depth to do a bit of a practical action plans as a way of an advice in a sense, I could maybe touch maybe the first three or four, just looking at our time. So let's look at trend number one, the attack surface expansion. So like I've already highlighted, just looking at the whole concept in a sense, it's that whole aspect around looking beyond the traditional approaches of, let's say, even your cyber threats detection, even the way you monitor your systems or you monitor even user behavior. That has to change, because if you are going to be finding yourself maybe sticking to the traditional approaches, then there is a lot that you're losing in that whole approach. Because one, what it takes for you to detect potential threats to your systems is beyond sometimes the practice of saying, I just have one system that I'm looking at. You now sometimes have several systems because you are outsourcing from different sections. Just to give a context, if you are managing a network as a professional, let's say you're a cybersecurity professional, you would notice that in your organization, we now have the concept of bring your own device. And in some scenarios, there's also even the concept of bring your own network, people are hotspotting, or at least in their in your organization, they are also using their devices in your organization. They use their smartwatches in your organizational network because they have access to the Wi-Fi code, etc. So that whole concept, that is bringing that whole headache around where could a potential attack come from, even in your network. So just trying to come back to creating awareness to you as a professional within that network. How can we look at this whole aspect? That would be a very interesting question to really pause and just say, if we are to discuss around the practicalities around that, if we are taking of the attack surface expansion, you need visibility. That's one thing. So whatever tools you're using, make sure they give you visibility of every assets that are connecting. When I'm talking of the assets, I'm talking of every device that you are connected to, whether it's even your home network as well. If we are to go back to our previous discussions, that is important to be in a position to do that. So this is where you actually have to make decisions, even when you're purchasing some security solutions, to say what capabilities do they have in terms of offering that visibility, in terms of the attack surface prevention, to say you are in a position to put everything into perspective, and holistically you're able to look at some of these aspects. Then I like what the Gartner does with trend number 2, which they call the identity system defense, where they talk of the ITDR, where they talk of identity, the threat, the detection, and the response. Basically, what is really that all about? It's all to do with the different collection of tools and processes that you can be having on your fingertips to defend the identity of your systems and to have a more consolidated kind of an approach in terms of your solution. So if you look, if you recall what I was simply saying in the previous trend, you want visibility. So this ITDR is kind of a guide in terms of, let's say you're looking at a solution, you are the professional, what solution are you looking at? Let me just jump into trend number 3. The digital supply chain. So if I'm looking at this prediction for 45% of organizations worldwide not going to really escape the chances of being attacked on their software supply chain, which is almost a 3-fold increase from the 2021 kind of experiences that were actually occurred. What this entails, we are looking at something that is not even going down. We are looking at something that is increasing. As a result, if you're looking at your digital supply chain, just to give context to that, you are looking at who is your service provider, who is your web designer, who is your who designed the system that you're using for ABCD, who designed the app that you're using for this functionality. All that comes into context. So once we have these whole challenges, what can we do? So one of the proposals being made is to look at security. You as a security leader, you as a security manager, I'm considering our professional today to be in the cybersecurity space, but that doesn't really exclude everybody who is also not in that space. So you need to have that open mindset approach where you have to partner with other departments, and you have to prioritize, especially some of the solutions that you could provide around these whole challenges. So in a sense, we have to move beyond just that kind of, maybe I would say, a more generalized approach when you're looking at solutions, just to say, do they comply with certain requirements? They tick this box, so it's okay. So it has to be beyond just simply compliance. We need to look at and put our suppliers to task. So I'll just give a typical example. You can't expect somebody to just develop a website for you and it doesn't even have an SSL certificate on it, and you see that warning sign when you go and visit your URL for your website, that on its own should really just raise those red flags in a sense. So those are some of the simple things that we need to look at, simply because they are able to design something or develop something. Do they have the security component embedded in their approach? This is where we hear such maybe fancy terms being talked in industry, especially if we were to go deeper into the technical, where we talk of DevSecOps, where we are talking of development and security embedded together, where even for any code that is being designed for any solution, for any system, for any app, it has to have that security. And we actually hear questions around, what are your DevSecOps plans, in a sense. I wouldn't want to go into the depths of the technicalities around that, but just to keep things simple, in a sense, can you really just hold even your suppliers accountable, in a sense? Otherwise, if we just neglect that part, you are still going to find ourselves in that whole dilemma. Then if we are to just dive quickly into the trend number 4, vendor consolidation, where we are looking at the challenge of course, in terms of maybe looking at cutting costs. That could be one approach, to say you have one dashboard where all the solutions that you need for your security, they are visible on one platform, and you are able to visualize them. That might be easier for you as a professional to say, I would find working in that approach way easier. And this is where sometimes we have that complexity as well, because we used to say centralization is not the best approach. Now we are saying we are going back again to centralization and say we need visibility. You want one dashboard, and that also creates maybe a potential for a single point of failure, which is one dilemma. But in a sense, there is also a recommendation along that line to say, if possible, make sure you know who are your providers, who are your clients, etc. Can you visualize them in the most simplified way as possible? Which is why having a single dashboard would also reduce that complexity. So when it comes to security, we normally recommend go the simplified route. If you are complicating things, this is where you lose even everybody that is supposed to be part and parcel of the whole equation, and you end up having those weaker links being created in your whole network or organizational setup, and the list goes on and on. I'll just quickly summarize on trend number 5 and just try to bring back the conversations, maybe just open up the conversation so that at least I don't get lost in this maze of just going through the content on my own. So in terms of the cybersecurity mesh, which is where I was highlighting the whole aspect of just consolidating everything together. And if we are looking at what exactly the trend is being analyzed or reviewed, especially around what Gartner said for 2024, organizations adopting a cybersecurity mesh architecture will reduce the financial impact of individual security incidents on average by 90%. What this is simply saying, we are having this approach to say, you could look at your whole organizational setup, and you could try and see how best you can make sure that you integrate cybersecurity in each and every of the operations. Well, this is where we are saying, let's have an interdisciplinary approach, an interdepartmental approach. If you are someone from IT, if you are not having a single communication line with marketing people, sales people, then there's something that is already amiss there, where they are actually just pushing the cybersecurity responsibility to the IT department. Then something has to change, which really speaks more directly to the last trend, which is beyond awareness, where if you look at beyond awareness, where we are saying, let's rethink the organizational culture approach. let's rethink our cybersecurity awareness training within our organizations, within our networks, within our teams, so that at least we can try to readdress some of the weaknesses that keep on popping from the traditional approaches when it comes to cybersecurity awareness. It's not just a tick the box or a check the box kind of an approach when it comes to cybersecurity awareness. It has to have that culture change. It has to have a different kind of an approach, in a sense, for us to really yield some results and see some trends changing, because we can't keep on doing the same things over and over again and expect we are going to get different results as a result. So this is why we need to think beyond awareness. I think with these few remarks, I think I've just poked here and there a number of pointers that we can discuss around. So Noble, I just give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. AMG. Look, you know, it's always good and very fascinating listening to cyber issues that you raise. But the question is, how do we get to beyond awareness? We know, and you the expert in this field. How, maybe let me rephrase. Do we have enough capacity in Africa? Let's leave the world. Do we have enough capacity in the world to ensure that all the issues, all the threats are addressed, and we are not a part of the statistics as we go into? You've made reference of 2024, where basically incident mesh, they say 90%. Do we have that capacity? If we have the capacity, where is it sitting? If we don't have, what do we need to do to ensure that we've got the competency and the capacity in our own continent?
That's a good question, Sonabo. Talking of capacity, that reminds me of some of the findings from the January survey that was also done by Checkpoint. That was also maybe on a global scale, but I'm just trying to contextualize it and bring it back home, as you said. Really, some of these trends, what they've also been able to expose is the lack of the needed skills to really implement some of the solutions or some of the best approaches or best practices to just move beyond awareness, as we are asking around that question. Yeah, one of the things we need to look at when it comes to the capacity, let's face the reality. You can just do a very quick stock take for the organizations or for the universities that we have in Africa. How many of those universities, in terms of even percentage-wise, that have a full curriculum on cybersecurity as a full-fledged curriculum, for instance? That would be one indicator for us to really say, yes, we are ready, yes, we have the capacity. We have an eager, youthful population, but sometimes they may not be having the necessary environment or platforms where they can really upskill, reskill as needed, in a sense. So that question of capacity, we are going to keep on having to ask ourselves time and again, and we're still going to reach maybe to the same conclusion that in terms of the capacity, there's still a lot to be done. That is a personal opinion, in case someone would want to misquote that. So I strongly feel we still have a long way to go, because even if you look at the statistics in terms of the gaps, on the cybersecurity skills that are needed in industry. We are not yet even near to fulfill those gaps. And we are going also even to continue to have the brain drain around the same skills for cybersecurity, because there is a shortage world over. And the few that we are also trying to, that we are producing, maybe even in Africa, we are going to lose them for greener pastures. So that's another biggest worry. Capacity we might be having, but to what extent, that remains an unanswered question. I
Anyway,
would put it across that way.
anyway, I think then it is clear to me. I know you did not go straight and answer it. It is clear that our capacity, our position on cybersecurity in the continent is questionable. Um,
Yep.
and the question is, I know few universities that really have got a module or a degree that is cyber focused. In your own words, what would you recommend that we start doing in Africa? In reality is, you've covered IoT, where your surface for attack
Mhm.
has been broadened.
Mhm.
IoT, more and more people are going to be connecting all type of gadgets from their houses, even the stove. how do
Yes.
we how do we stop Miss X from sending a virus to a stove? You know, can you
Mhm.
imagine
Mhm.
if the whole house has been hit by a virus? The fridge is malfunctioning, the stove is malfunctioning. If the bed also is connected for comfort, everything is malfunctioning in that house. How do you leave? How do we go about? How do we stop such an attack?
Well, that's a very important question to really even ask ourselves. That in as much as it's being considered one of the trends, and this is where most of the weaknesses are coming into play, to say, if you're going to need access to a bank, you don't need to stress in terms of how you're going to have access to that bank. You only need to know who works at that bank, and do they have a smart stove like you have indicated? Do they have? And already you're going to find your way in one way or the other. And if you look at some of the funny attacks that have been happening for the recent years or previous years, where even a fish pond, because it's connected using IoT to the internet,
Mm.
was used to attack a casino. So how do we stop that? This is where we come back to say it's beyond awareness that we need to move from. So it's also has to go further to say, let's how best can we do a culture change around our practices, where some normally prefer how do we address our cyber hygiene in terms of when we are online, um, are we conscious of the actions, the behaviors that we are extending while we are connected? To say, the fact that even whether it's a pen that you're using to write and it has the capability of being connected to the internet, just leaving it even unsecured, do do we know the implications of that? So I may not really have kind of a precise solution per se to say, let's do one, two, three, and I think this is going to be solved. But it's going to take uh, a whole network of users to be on board, so that at least we have that security patched to the right level. Because I'm going to take, for example, that smart stove that you indicated. we need to go back to the manufacturer. If they are not going to hurry their manufacturing because they have to push for sales, and they're just going to have weak security when they are designing that, because to them, they are also trying to be trendy, have something that is smart, that can be connected to the internet. But security is never the focus here. They want a product that can sell because it has these functionalities. So we have to start even from the root of where some of these devices are coming from. And some of the pressures, it's almost like a vicious cycle as well. We also have the users themselves pressuring that whole cycle of manufacturing, so that it's rushed and it's not addressing security at the end of the day. So it's everybody's responsibility within that whole chain. This is where the supply chain has been highlighted as one of the trends for cybersecurity from now on going forward, because it's every dot that you are able to connect, from the product manufacturing to the usage and all that. And we need everybody having some security, some solutions designed around the threats that could potentially penetrate into a network in a sense. So there's a lot at play here. It's still a complex challenge to try and tackle. It's like an elephant. We have to eat it one piece at a time, but we have to find the best way we can do that as well.
So as we go into the future, we need more resources, because then can you imagine the population that can afford in the next coming 5 to 10 years to protect a smart home, let alone corporates? Then we need resources to protect a smart city.
Mm-hmm.
Then we need resources to hopefully protect a smart village and a smart township.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So now, if we don't turn all our universities and all our TVETs to focus on cybersecurity, we'll be left stranded.
Yeah, certainly. This is where, if you look at our departure point from our last month's discussion, where we said charity begins at home but should not end there. I like the way you are cascading the whole impact in terms of what it entails if we don't have a secure smart home, how it also has a detrimental effect on a secure smart city, a secure
Mm,
smart village, and that whole network is affected just from a single action. It was a smart stove in a smart home that was not secured, and
yes.
how that ripple effect is now being felt. So you just threw a stone in a pond, and the ripples are being created, affecting everything. That's the kind of dilemma that we find ourselves in. So when it comes to the education around cybersecurity, there is no compromise around that. I think it's a high time our education systems have to rethink their curriculum, and that recalculation of the curriculum. And at a point in time, there was this movement where I was hearing the democratization of the curriculum, etc. I think it's a high time we also rethink it along the lines of what cybersecurity is, and just make sure it's also given the priority right now. And it has to be interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, whichever terminology you're trying to use there. It's not only supposed to be for the people that are doing IT, it's supposed to be for everybody who find themselves in the digital space, either
The,
as a user.
mm,
That has to be the case.
the only challenge that I have, and every time I think about, and you can guide me, Dr. MG,
Mm.
we are pushing for more and more of the youngsters, youth, to to play in the software or app development space, and you did touch on it. That says the URL, if it does not say secured, it was left exposed. You left exposed. And
Mhm.
if they don't have cyber security or cyber capability or knowledge when they are developing, all those environments are basically left exposed.
Yeah, certainly that is important. This is why you are finding discussions around even big corporates these days. They emphasizing this whole notion of DevSecOps, where we are saying development of the systems, development of those apps, where is the security embedded in that whole process? And it has to be part and parcel of the whole chain from the drawing board even to the implementation. So if we have security as an afterthought, we have missed the whole point of even coming up with a solution or coming up with even a system, because then we are just trying to redress, but at the root of that system it still has the weaknesses. So this is why security shouldn't be an afterthought. It has to be.
So,
Yeah.
so if I think I can ask you,
Yes.
then is it not important that the industry must have like a cybersecurity standards where all development of applications or platforms or systems must go past somebody in the cyberspace that is going to look for all these cybersecurity elements.
That's a good question. The moment you pose that question as well, something also rang into my mind where we also have these discussions around the AI ethics as well. To
Yeah.
say now everybody is jumping and saying we're talking of all the 4IR enabled technologies, your blockchain, your AI, and IoT, just to mention a few.
Yeah.
So that whole aspect around the standardization, it's something that is still having circles around academics, around different discussion circles. We need um, standardization bodies that really are policing that whole aspect. But that also has to be scrutinized in a more deeper way, in a sense, so that at least it's not just a checkbox ticking to say, okay, do you have one, two, three, which is more or less kind of some traditional standardization that still existing. We need something that is beyond that, where we even have systems that have to go through some technical testing, and you are able to say, after going through this framework, after going through this maybe model, this is what are the results that have been produced out of the testing that has been done on security checks. This is where we bring in even the AI to use to and maybe to also facilitate that standardization, in a sense, to say if it's a system, put it in a standardization or as a security checked AI enabled system that's going to validate, to say in terms of all the security checks that are needed for this system, one, two, three has been met, and we put also the human eye over and above that as well. I think we need that reinforcement when it comes to that part. And this is also one other missing link that we are having. So it's very important we are raising that part of standard boards, etc. That's important.
Well, Dr. AMG, thank you very much. I think we always have these very interesting discussions and really questioning some aspects in our society or our ecosystem. I think there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of things to be done. And with us around and many others as part of with your capability and the know-how as an expert in the space, maybe some of the aspects that we've discussed are things that people like yourself who are experts must start looking at them for the good of
It's
Africa.
it's indeed it's an honor hearing about that responsibility, and I will keep pushing it back as well to say cybersecurity is for everybody's responsibility. So we are going to need more hands on the deck. Um, and this is one call that we keep on having to remind each other to say there is a lot that needs to be done in the space. We need concerted efforts, and we need to keep on reskilling, upskilling. The challenge we are facing, we are in a dynamic field, so we need to always be on our feet as well.
Look, yeah.
Yeah.
You are not saying yes, but you are saying it's our responsibility, all of us. Uh,
Yes, all of us.
and the only challenge that I have is that of our dependency to the outside world. You know, we depend a lot on the West and the East now. So maybe it's something that we need. And now I'm talking as wearing my shoes on my head as a Pictarian, as part of Picta. I think Picta is one of those organizations that must look at such challenges that we have in our continent on cybersecurity. And it's always lovely. It's always great talking to you. You always stretch my thinking. And for someone who's going to watch this thing one day, uh, when they think of setting up that body, they must come to you and me. We first discussed it.
Certainly, certainly.
Yes, they must come to you and me. So on that note, I think we must thank people that normally go and watch our videos post the session, and I will always be grateful for the time that you make out of a very busy schedule that you have, to come and share with us, and not, there's very few people that are not selfish, people who are willing to share their knowledge, and you're one of them. Thank you very much. uh, we've come to our end until next week. Oh, no, 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 not next week, until next month.
Yes, until next month. And
And
from my side as well, I would also want to thank you for your dedication, making sure that these tech power shows really going on, and it's an honor really following through many other discussions that are happening on this platform. And we just keep on saying we are rallying behind you. As the vision for Picta, and we are saying let the good work continue, and we'll try our level best from time to time to always pitch up like we do here on cybersecurity once every month. We also have other um, really renowned practitioners in industry, experts. Also, we also grace this platform. We are grateful for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
thank you very much. I'm just going to go out on a jingle and say thank you to everyone for coming through every time, for supporting us. We are really trying very hard to cover a lot of topics, and this is one of the most important topics within the Picta ecosystem. And we'll always be there on monthly basis to address questions on cybersecurity. You can drop an email to info@picta.org for any questions that you have, and I'll forward those questions to Dr. AMG. I'll be back, Dr. A.